When I returned to the administration department, Chloe chased after me, shouting loudly at the entrance.
Hey, old lady, hurry up with the coffee. My dad's the vice president, you know?
Chloe's words reached the ears of every employee nearby, causing them all to freeze in place.
Surprised, huh? If you don't want to get fired, make me some coffee right now, Amy, the useless job hopper.
At that moment, everyone around us burst out laughing. Chloe was unable to understand why everyone was laughing at her, looked confused and panicked. She had probably intended to reveal her status as the vice president's daughter in front of everyone, enjoying the sight of me scrambling to make her coffee and basking in a sense of superiority. "Oh, so you're the vice president's daughter," I said as I stepped forward to stand in front of her. Chloe seemed slightly relieved that I finally moved, puffing her chest out arrogantly again.
Exactly. That's why I can do whatever I want with you.
Hearing her boast, I decided to introduce myself. My name is Amy Williams, and I'm 58 years old. I've been married for 30 years. I have one child, my eldest son Sean, who turned 29 this year. Sean is single and currently working in Germany, so I live with my husband, Richard, just the two of us. Although I miss seeing my son, I enjoy spending my days with my coworkers and husband. I've been working at a supermarket chain that has expanded its stores across the state and neighboring areas. I joined this company at the age of 22, took maternity and childcare leave, and have been working there ever since. However, 5 years ago my mother fell ill, and since then, I've scaled back my workload. I took full advantage of caregiving leave and transferred to the branch closest to my home. I focused on balancing work, household chores, and caring for my mother, but my mother passed away a few months ago. Although I knew this day would come, I spent days doing nothing because of the loneliness and loss. Many people attended her funeral. Because the company values its employees, even those from the headquarters come to pay their respects in times of personal loss. As my colleagues gave words of encouragement to my father and me, I noticed a young female employee I had never seen before. She seemed quite new to the company, likely attending an event like this for the first time.
Nice to meet you. I'm Chloe Smith from headquarters.
The woman who introduced herself as Chloe greeted me with those words. Right in the middle of the funeral, I was a little confused, but I was trying to offer my hands. Then, Chloe gave me a bright smile and said this.
So this is what funerals are like. Great learning experience. Must be tough for the family too.
Fortunately, I was the only one who heard her, so my family didn't seem upset. However, speaking to me, the deceased daughter, her lack of common sense behavior was astonishing me. In fact, based on her remarks, it seemed she didn't even realize I was the deceased daughter. Although I couldn't see my own expression, I'm sure her words left me visibly stiff. Still, this was my mother's farewell. I forced a smile to her not to let anger take over me, and watched as Chloe returned to her seat. I couldn't help but keep my eyes on her as she walked away. Given that I was still in shock because of my mother's death, so I might have been overly fixated on her. I resolved to forget her rudeness, took a deep breath, and shifted my focus away from her. After the funeral, as I stepped outside to bid farewell to the attendees, I noticed Chloe in the parking lot. She was chatting animatedly with some others. Given what had just happened, I couldn't help myself be overly aware of her presence. That's when I overheard her voice.
Well, that was exhausting. Can't believe so many people showed up. Honestly, isn't it kind of a waste to go all out like this for someone who's gone?
Chloe was unaware that I was listening. She laughed loudly. Were the people with Chloe also employees? I didn't recognize them, but those around her reprimanded Chloe for what she said.
Chloe, you shouldn't say things like that.
Yeah, think about how the family must feel. That's so disrespectful.
However, Chloe didn't seem to hear them.
Still, people like me, who came even though we have no connection to the deceased, deserve some credit. I mean, I came all the way here for something so boring.
Well,
Oh, and by the way, that grandson, he's so hot. Did you see him? I even got his number. Honestly, that alone made coming here worth it.
Then I lost my temper. If that was her attitude, she didn't need to attend at all. I was about to march over and give her a piece of my mind when I locked eyes with one of the female employees standing with Chloe. The woman had noticed that I had overheard their conversation. I was taken aback when I noticed a female employee, looking flustered, bowing apologetically to me. While Chloe likely found the situation as unamusing as her earlier remarks suggested, the employees with her still took the time to call her out. If I stormed over to confront them, those employees might feel responsible as well. Taking a deep breath, as I had during the funeral, I calmed myself down. Even knowing that I had overheard her, Chloe didn't seem to notice how rude she was. I walked back to my family after I said goodbye to Chloe and the female employees. A month later, I returned to work. Having scaled back my workload before, I now wanted to fully contribute to the company. After 5 years, I was reassigned to headquarters and started with a renewed sense of determination. But there was none other than Chloe waiting for me.
Hey, old lady. This area's off limits to unauthorized personnel.
She called out as soon as she saw me. Her face and voice brought back memories of the funeral, and I clenched my fists. But Chloe seemed to have forgotten all about me.
Well, are you going to say something? Should I call security?
No, I was just reassigned to headquarters starting today.
Oh well, you should have said that sooner. Looks like we've got another slow job hopper around here.
Chloe burst into laughter at my words. It was clear to me that Chloe enjoyed looking down on others and thought she was above everyone else. I'm sorry. It felt pointless to argue, so I didn't bother correcting her and simply responded briefly. I figured we'd be working in different departments, so avoiding her wouldn't be difficult. With that in mind, I suppressed my negative feelings toward her. Later, I introduced myself to the administrative team I was assigned to. It had been 5 years, but most of the employees were familiar faces. They warmly welcomed me back, even offering condolences once more for my mother's passing. Chloe, however, was part of the accounting department. The administration and accounting departments shared the same floor, including common areas like the break room and locker rooms. Though I wanted nothing to do with her, we inevitably crossed paths often, which became my one source of stress. For some reason, Chloe seemed intent on picking fights with me.
So, Amy, how old are you?
I'm 58.
Wow, that's wild. Still working at your age. What does your husband even do?
She constantly belittled me and laughed. While ignoring her might have escalated the situation, I stuck to neutral, non-committal responses. Even so, Chloe's constant belittling wore me down little by little. 3 weeks into my return, I ran into Chloe again in the locker room. As usual, she struck up a conversation.
Hey there. Getting used to the place yet? The admin department's all just odd jobs anyway, so easy, right?
Odd jobs. No, every task we handle is important for the company.
Oh, don't try to compete with me just because odd jobs are all you can manage. Shh, shh.
That day, Chloe mocked my work and laughed. Then I snapped back at her. No, I'm not trying to compete with you at all. Honestly, I wouldn't even want to be in the same league as you.
What? Do you even know who you're talking to? Do you know who I am?
Chloe's expression turned sour, and she snapped at me, her displeasure evident. I don't care who you are. I have no interest in someone who constantly belittles her coworkers. I responded firmly, maintaining my composure. Chloe's face quickly turned bright red. Whether out of anger at being talked back to or embarrassment from being called out, she was at a loss for words. Leaving her behind, I hurriedly exited the locker room. Well, it's time to go, bye. I finally managed to talk back, and it felt a little satisfying. I hoped this would put an end to Chloe's snide remarks toward me. However, out of spite, Chloe took an outrageous action against me. The next day, when I arrived at work as usual, I was greeted by the sight of my ransacked locker. What is the hell? Why? Though we lock our lockers while using them, it's common practice to leave them unlocked after hours. In the past, there were frequent issues with people forgetting their locker keys or losing them at home or during their commute, leading to situations where employees couldn't access their lockers and were unable to start work. Because of this, no one, including me, kept valuables in their locker. Most people stored only work-related materials, like meeting documents or planners. Some people might keep items like photo frames, but there's nothing that would be problematic if someone else saw it. In my case, my locker held spare stationery and an emergency handkerchief. Even so, I kept it neatly organized and clean. Yet that day, all the contents of my locker were scattered across the floor.
I just got here and found it like this.
Sarah, a female employee from the same department who had arrived earlier, looked just as shocked at the sight. Sarah was 1 year ahead of Chloe. She also worked in the administration department, and I had only met her after my reassignment to headquarters, but she struck me as a very pleasant person. What could have happened?
For now, let's clean this up. I'll help.
Honestly, I was in shock. I had never experienced such harassment before and stood there stunned and shaken. But Sarah quickly crouched down and began picking up my belongings for me. Just then, the locker room door opened. Chloe walked in. Seeing us, she raised her voice loudly.
What's going on here?
Oh, I found it like this when I arrived this morning. When I said that, Chloe shifted her gaze to Sarah.
Wait, could it be Sarah? How could you do something like this?
What?
Sarah, startled by suddenly being called out, froze and stared at Chloe.
Sarah, just because Amy isn't good at her job doesn't mean you should do something so horrible.
What? It wasn't me.
Amy, is Sarah harassing you? You need to report this to management if that's the case.
Chloe's words made me widen my eyes in disbelief.
Seriously, Amy, it wasn't me.
People who seem nice on the surface can be scary behind the scenes, huh?
Sarah desperately pleaded with Chloe, but Chloe just chuckled as she left the locker room. Shortly after, Sarah, her face pale, began explaining herself.
Amy, I swear it wasn't me.
I knew Sarah wasn't the type of person to do something like this. It had only been 3 weeks since we started working together, but I knew enough to be certain. Don't worry, I don't think it was you. When I reassured Sarah, she smiled slightly, looking relieved. Still, one question lingered in my mind. What had Chloe come to the locker room for? She didn't have a bag with her, which meant she had already clocked in for work. With that, the identity of the true culprit became obvious without needing much thought. With that, the identity of the true culprit became obvious without needing much thought.
But really, who would?
She still seemed to have no idea. Good question, but for now, let's clean this up, I said, following her lead. I couldn't shake off my irritation with Chloe as I began my tasks for the day. By 10 a.m., I had a short break, so I headed to the break room to make some coffee. Coincidentally, Chloe was already there and let out a short "oh" when she saw me. Morning.
Good morning. Rough start to your day, huh? Well, Sarah was awful, but I think you share some of the blame too.
Chloe said as she started rambling on.
You probably can't do your job properly anyway, right? Honestly, it'd be better for everyone if both an incompetent old lady and a spiteful woman just disappeared.
So Chloe wanted both of us out. Recognizing her intent, I kept silent as usual. Apparently annoyed by my lack of response, Chloe raised her voice.
Are you even listening, old lady?
Yes, I'm listening.
Well, at least answer me. Oh, and make me some coffee while you're at it.
Watching me make my coffee, Chloe gave me a condescending order. Why on earth should I make coffee for her too? Ignoring her words, I prepared only my own coffee. Chloe then spoke again in an even more intimidating tone.
Hey, you're mocking me, aren't you?
Not at all.
Should I remind you of who I am?
Chloe had mentioned who she was yesterday as well. Didn't I say yesterday that I'm not interested? I said, then she was making her snort. However, I couldn't waste my time engaging with her. I took my coffee and left the break room. Chloe followed me back to the administration department and shouted at the entrance.
Hey, old lady, hurry up with the coffee. My dad's the vice president, you know.
Her words reached everyone in the room, causing them to stop what they were doing.
Surprised? If you don't want to get fired, make me some coffee right now, Amy, the useless job hopper.
At that moment, everyone around us burst out laughing.
Chloe, what are you even saying? Coming all the way to admin for this.
What?
Old lady? You mean Amy? What's gotten into you?
As everyone bombarded Chloe with questions, Chloe was unable to understand why everyone was laughing at her, looked confused and panicked. She had probably intended to reveal her status as the vice president's daughter in front of everyone, enjoying the sight of me scrambling to make her coffee and basking in a sense of superiority. I had said from the beginning that I wasn't interested. My sigh of disbelief made her face even redder.
Fine. Stop laughing and get moving already. And if you keep mocking me, I'll tell my dad.
Though I had just sat down, I reluctantly got up and walked over to Chloe.
Finally decided to move, huh?
So you're the vice president's daughter? I talked to her again, standing in front of her. Chloe looked slightly relieved that I had finally reacted and puffed out her chest arrogantly once again.
Exactly. That's why I can do whatever I want with you.
In that case, let me properly introduce myself. I'm Amy Williams, daughter of Kevin Morris, the founder and current CEO and chairman of this company. Pleased to meet you.
What?
Chloe let out a small gasp at my words. From the administration department, I could hear soft chuckles escaping again.
Chairman's daughter?
It seemed that saying it out loud finally made her understand, as Chloe's face quickly turned pale. Yes, didn't I mention it? Well, I'm just a regular employee, so it doesn't really matter who I am, does it? Indeed, I was the only daughter of Kevin Morris, who had founded this company and currently served as its chairman. My husband worked for a different company, and I held no special title here. Though the company wasn't family-run, I never kept my background a secret, so employees who already knew me were aware of it. The members of the administration department, to which I had been reassigned, had likely heard about it as well. When I scaled back my workload to care for my mother, I already held a managerial position. However, since I rarely came to work, I felt it was unfair to the other employees, so I requested to be reassigned as a general employee. Now, both my workload and salary are exactly the same as any other general employee. I received feedback and corrections from supervisors, and I sometimes asked colleagues for help when I didn't understand something. Thankfully, no one treated me any differently.
No one told me that.
Unable to hide her shock, Chloe muttered softly, "That's because it doesn't matter who I am. Didn't I already tell you that?"
Well, I mean,
Oh, by the way, thank you for making time to attend my mother's funeral. I really appreciate it. Chloe froze at my words. She finally realized that the funeral she had attended was for my mother, the chairman's wife. At that time, Chloe must have assumed I was just a relative. Looking at me now, everything clicked for her. She understood that I had overheard her saying, "a great learning experience," and mocking the family during the funeral, as well as her derogatory remarks in the parking lot afterward. Chloe's face was obviously pale, and she eventually began to tremble. Honestly, though, I'd rather you hadn't attended with that kind of attitude.
well,
Things like calling it a great learning experience or saying it was boring, those aren't things you should say in front of the bereaved family. But, well, it's all in the past now. The employees who had been laughing earlier were now silent, their eyes fixed on us. Among the murmurs, I could hear whispers repeating what Chloe said at the funeral, and comments like, "Did she really say that?" and "unbelievable." Even Chloe could hear the growing disdain towards her. She pressed her lips tightly together. Then, in a trembling voice, she muttered,
Why am I the only one being treated like the bully? Isn't it kind of unfair to hide your identity like that? Don't you think?
Chloe spoke, her words trailing off weakly. I let out a sigh. It was because she showed no remorse. I'm not saying these things to you because I'm the chairman's daughter.
But you're still using that too.
Didn't I respond to you yesterday as well? If you're taking my words differently now, it's only because you're fixated on who you think I am. Chloe froze at my words. It was true that I was the chairman's daughter, but I never brought up my father at work to flaunt my status. I also made sure my colleagues didn't feel that way. Chloe, on the other hand, constantly boasted about being the vice president's daughter, which is why she became overly conscious of my identity. If you understand now, get back to work and make your own coffee. I left her with those words and returned to my seat.
Amy, that was so cool.
Sarah murmured in admiration as I sat down. Her comment was followed by applause from everyone around. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Chloe slip away, looking as though she was fleeing the scene. This incident quickly spread throughout the headquarters. It must have also reached the ears of Chloe's father, the vice president. That evening, both Chloe and the vice president came to see me.
Amy, do you have a moment?
Judging by the vice president's pale face, he wanted to discuss what had happened earlier that day. I agreed to the request and ended up having a discussion with the two of them in a meeting room. As soon as we sat down, the vice president apologized sincerely over and over.
Dad?
Chloe's eyes widened. Please, the vice president, you don't have to do that.
No. I heard that my daughter was extremely rude to you, Amy, my senior. I honestly don't know how to apologize enough.
Amy, my senior?
Chloe echoed, confused. The vice president lifted his head and turned to Chloe.
Yes. Amy was my direct supervisor when I first joined the company. She covered for my mistakes countless times and took care of me so much. I wouldn't have become the vice president without her recommendation.
Chloe could never have imagined such a connection between us. Hearing the vice president's words, her face turned as pale as it had that morning. Please stop. You became the vice president because of your own hard work.
But
Sure, I was angry at your daughter, but she's an adult. She needs to take responsibility for her actions. As I spoke, I shifted my gaze to Chloe. She flinched at my stare. Isn't that right, Chloe? What you did wasn't just about the things you said to me, was it?
what?
The vice president raised his voice and glared at Chloe.
Well,
Chloe shrank in her seat, muttering faintly before falling silent.
What's going on, Amy?
The vice president was growing impatient, then turned to me and asked. However, it wouldn't mean anything coming from me. She needed to admit it herself to truly reflect on her actions. Chloe, tell him what happened this morning in your own words. After a moment of hesitation, Chloe finally spoke.
I messed up Amy's locker.
What? You did that?
And that's not all, is it?
I tried to blame Sarah for it.
As she said this, Chloe began to sob. She had finally come to realize the foolishness of her actions. Why did you try to blame Sarah?
Because Sarah is quiet and reserved, but everyone likes her. I thought if I started a bad rumor about her, it would change things.
Chloe explained her reasons for trying to frame Sarah. While I hadn't been fooled by Chloe's scheme, it was clear that she disliked Sarah as much as she did me. Perhaps Sarah had also been subjected to snide remarks and harassment, just like I was. It got my anger, which I had been trying to suppress, back again. Just as I was about to respond, the vice president let out a heavy sigh and buried his head in his hands.
Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't think it would turn out like this.
Sensing the severity of the situation, Chloe tried to apologize and make excuses.
Quiet. You're apologizing to the wrong person.
However, the vice president shouted angrily at Chloe. Chloe froze, her eyes wide with shock. She was clearly taken aback. The vice president, I knew, was a gentle and mild-mannered person. He must have been that kind of gentle father to Chloe as well. That's why seeing him so openly angry and shouting at her made it clear just how furious he was. Tears streamed down Chloe's face as she apologized to me.
Amy, I'm truly sorry.
I sincerely apologize as well. I let my affection for my daughter blind me and brought her into the company, thinking she would enjoy working here with everyone. I never imagined she would end up hurting so many people.
I'm so sorry. I'm really sorry. Dad, Amy, please forgive me.
Moved by the vice president's heartfelt regret, Chloe began apologizing again and again. I accepted her sincere apology, and it made me feel slightly better. However, forgiving her entirely was a different matter. Since they wanted to discuss things as a family, I left the meeting room and went home afterward. However, something about Chloe still nagged at me. Specifically, her claim during my mother's funeral that she had gotten my grandson's contact information. The only grandson of my mother had was my son, Sean. Sean had returned here for the funeral, but he was back in Germany, so I immediately reached out to him. Sean, I need to ask you something. Did you exchange contact info with someone named Chloe from the company during Grandma's funeral?
Oh yeah, I did. Why?
I hesitated for a moment. If Sean liked Chloe, I worried that telling him what I knew would make me seem like a meddling mother-in-law.
What's wrong? Just tell me. You wouldn't call me about something like this unless it was important.
Well, you see, Feeling hesitant, I told Sean about what Chloe had said and the incident that had occurred. Sean listened quietly, but as soon as I finished, he simply said, "Got it," and hung up. I began to worry if I had upset him. In the end, Sean didn't return my call. 2 days passed. Although Chloe continued coming to work, she seemed to be avoiding me, and we didn't cross paths. What worried me more was that I hadn't got any news from Sean, and then something unexpected happened. That day, a sudden announcement over the company intercom called for an end-of-day meeting. These meetings were usually held only at the end of the fiscal quarter.
Do you know what this is about?
No, I have no idea. People often assumed that, as the chairman's daughter, I would have inside information, but I was just as clueless. As instructed, all headquarters employees gathered in the main conference room. When I arrived, I couldn't believe my eyes. Standing next to my father on stage was Sean, who was supposed to be in Germany.
My grandson, Sean, will be joining our company as its new CEO.
Hearing this, my eyes widened in shock. It turned out that Sean's work in Germany had been to learn about the retail industry there. While Sean had always planned to return to America and take over the company someday, this announcement caught me completely off guard. I simply sat there with my mouth open.
My name is Sean Williams. Starting next fiscal year, I'll be taking on the role of CEO.
The room erupted in applause, and I found myself clapping along. After the meeting ended, the employees left the conference room. I stayed behind, intending to speak with Sean and my father, but someone reached Sean before I could.
Sean.
It was Chloe. Feeling awkward, I remembered how I had told Sean about Chloe's behavior a few days earlier. Unaware of any of this, Chloe approached Sean with a saccharine tone.
Congratulations on becoming CEO. I thought you weren't coming back until the end of the year, so this is a pleasant surprise.
Yeah, some things changed.
If you're free, how about grabbing dinner together tonight?
Chloe invited Sean out. Sean responded with a slight smile.
Sorry, but I don't associate with people who harass my girlfriend.
What? Girlfriend?
Both Chloe and I were stunned by his words.
Oh, Mom. Perfect timing. This is a great chance to introduce her to you and Grandpa.
Sean waved someone over, and both Chloe and I turned to see who it was. Both Chloe and I followed his gesture. There stood Sarah, looking slightly bashful. That made my beaming smile. Wait, what's going on, Sarah?
Mom, calm down.
I'm sorry for keeping it a secret.
Sarah apologized to me sincerely, but I shook my head vigorously.
This is Sarah, my girlfriend. We're planning to get married next year.
Sean said, a bit shyly, as he introduced her to me and my father. Both my father and I were overjoyed. Really? Oh, I'm so happy for you.
That's a lie.
Chloe's voice shattered the happy atmosphere.
There's no way. Sarah can't marry Sean.
Tears streamed down Chloe's face as she continued.
You were so kind to me. Was that all fake? We've been texting back and forth this whole time.
I only replied because you're the vice president's daughter. I wasn't being especially nice. I turned down your invitations for dinner after I returned and told you I wasn't interested in dating you, didn't I?
Sean spoke with a hint of discomfort. Hearing this, Sarah gave a wry smile. Honestly, I felt relieved that Chloe had been rejected.
But being the vice president's daughter shouldn't matter.
Chloe, seemingly unable to accept it, voiced her frustration, but I couldn't help but burst into laughter. Chloe, you're the one who's been using your status as the vice president's daughter to your advantage. Isn't it a bit selfish to suddenly claim it doesn't matter?
Well,
If Sean only entertained you because of that title, isn't that the biggest compliment to you? It might have been a bit mean, but I said it to Chloe anyway. As expected, she had no response and turned bright red, lowering her head.
Anyway, that's the way it is. Oh, and by the way, I heard from Mom about what you've been up to. I have no intention of using my title as a weapon, but I'd appreciate it if you stopped harassing the CEO's mother, wife-to-be, and the valued employees of this company.
No, that's not what I meant.
Rejected by Sean, Chloe finally broke down in tears. My father, looking troubled, pulled out his phone and began making a call. A few minutes later, the vice president, who had left earlier, rushed back into the conference room, likely summoned by my father.
I sincerely apologize.
The vice president said this, then pulled the crying Chloe away as they left the room. As we watched the two leave, I exchanged a smile with Sarah. Afterward, Chloe resigned from the company. Her harassment of other employees was enough to warrant dismissal under company policy, but she was still young, and the vice president had contributed greatly to the company over the years. Her voluntary resignation was accepted. However, following the incident, the vice president publicly declared he was cutting ties with Chloe. Chloe was forced out of her family home and lost her job, then is now living alone in an apartment. It seems her heartbreak was particularly devastating, and she has become a recluse.
I consider her no longer my daughter.
The vice president apologized to us repeatedly and concluded with those final words.
My wife still checks in on her.
Well, as her mother, it's understandable. I don't hold your family accountable for her actions.
Thank you. And I'm sorry.
This conversation occurred after Chloe's resignation. Her mother takes care of her now because she is not in a condition to work yet. Chloe's downfall was entirely of her own making. While I sympathize with the vice president, but I think she deserved it. That said, I believe it's better for her to take this time to reflect on her actions and think about how to move forward, rather than rushing back into society and repeating the same mistakes. About 6 months passed since that incident. Sean returned to the U.S. as promised. He then assumed the position of CEO of our company. Having my son continue the family legacy fills me with unparalleled happiness. Though my husband works for a different company, our whole family celebrated Sean's new role as CEO. And then he married Sarah. Just a few days ago, we received the wonderful news that Sarah is expecting a baby. I'm sure my late mother is smiling down on us from heaven. From now on, I plan to support Sean and Sarah in any way I can, so they can build a happy future together.